You already raised one child, my mother said, loud enough for half the restaurant to hear. So stop acting selfish and take the baby. The entire table went quiet after that. Not the normal kind of quiet either. The ugly kind. The kind where forks stop moving and strangers start pretending not to stare while absolutely staring. I remember feeling my face burn so hot I thought I might actually pass out. My younger sister Ashley sat beside my mother in her graduation cap and gown, mascara running down her cheeks like she was the victim in all this. Her boyfriend Tyler leaned back in his chair scrolling through his phone, avoiding eye contact like a coward. And my dad just sat there rubbing his forehead like this was all exhausting for him. Meanwhile, I was the one being publicly cornered. My mother shoved a pink diaper bag across the table toward me. Enough drama, Vanessa, she snapped. Ashley deserves a chance to have her future. I stared at the bag for a second, then at Ashley, then at my parents, and slowly I realized something horrifying. This wasn't some emotional conversation that got out of control. They planned this. The restaurant. The audience. The tears. The pressure. Every single part of it. I'm not taking your baby, I said quietly. Ashley let out this loud choking sob that immediately turned heads from nearby tables. Oh my God, she cried. I knew you'd do this to me. A woman sitting 2 tables away actually looked at me with disgust. That's when my mother stood up. Actually stood up in the middle of the restaurant and pointed at me. She's jealous, she announced. That's what this really is. Ashley still has opportunities ahead of her and Vanessa can't stand it. I felt like the floor disappeared underneath me. Because deep down, part of me still wanted my mother to choose me for once. Even at 34 years old. Even after everything. And the worst part? Sitting inside my purse at that exact moment was proof Ashley had planned this humiliation for weeks. Proof my own family had been lying about me behind my back. But before I tell you how my sister's graduation stunt completely destroyed the image my parents spent years protecting, I should probably explain how we got here in the first place. My name is Vanessa Carter. I'm 34 years old and for most of my life, my family treated me like I existed to clean up everybody else's messes. I live in Columbus, Ohio with my 12-year-old son Eli. I work as a respiratory therapist at a hospital downtown, which basically means I spend 12-hour shifts helping people breathe while forgetting to breathe myself. Especially during the pandemic. Those years changed me. Not just physically. Emotionally too. You learn a lot about people when life gets hard. You learn who shows up. Who disappears. Who only calls when they need something. My family fell into that last category. I got pregnant young. I was 21, terrified, and suddenly raising a baby mostly alone after Eli's father disappeared halfway through my pregnancy. My parents never said they were disappointed exactly. But they didn't have to. You can feel disappointment without hearing the words. Meanwhile, Ashley, my younger sister by 6 years, was always treated differently. She was creative. Sensitive. Full of potential. That was my mother's favorite phrase. Ashley has so much potential. It didn't matter that Ashley quit jobs constantly. Didn't pay bills. Started projects she never finished. Somehow every failure became proof she just hadn't found herself, yet. But me. I survived. And apparently survival isn't impressive when people expect it from you. I paid my own nursing school loans. Bought my own condo. Raised my son without help. Worked overtime until my feet swelled so badly I cried in the shower at night. And somehow my family still talked about me like I was the cautionary tale. Like Ashley was the future. And I was just the warning. The crazy thing is, for years I accepted it. I really did. I told myself my parents loved us differently, not unequally. But there's only so many birthdays you spend watching your sister open expensive gifts while your parents hand you a gas station card and say, "You're hard to shop for." There's only so many times you hear, "You're stronger than Ashley. You can handle more. She needs us more right now." Eventually you realize strength becomes a prison when people use it as an excuse to neglect you. I kept showing up. Because that's what daughters like me do. We show up. We forgive. We carry things nobody asks us if we're tired of carrying. And honestly, part of me thought if I just kept being good enough, useful enough, dependable enough, maybe someday my family would finally love me the way they loved Ashley. But about 8 months before that restaurant disaster, something started changing inside me. Small at first. I started therapy after one of my coworkers found me crying in a supply closet during a double shift. I was exhausted all the time. Angry all the time. Numb in ways that scared me. And during one therapy session my therapist asked me something that completely wrecked me. He said, "What if the role your family assigned you is not the same thing as who you actually are?" I remember staring at her like she'd spoken another language. Because I had spent so long being the responsible one. I didn't even know who Vanessa was outside of that anymore. So slowly, quietly I started rebuilding my life. I stopped answering every late-night crisis call from Ashley. I started saving money seriously. And without telling my family, I created a small online page helping overwhelmed single moms understand hospital bills, insurance paperwork and medical support programs. At first it was tiny. Maybe 20 followers. Then 50. Then hundreds. Women started messaging me saying I helped them during the worst moments of their lives. And for the first time in years, I felt valuable for something other than sacrifice. Of course my family never knew any of that. Because every time I succeeded at something, they either mocked it or ignored it completely. So I learned to keep my growth private. Turns out that decision would become very important later. Because around the same time my life finally started stabilizing, Ashley started falling apart. Ashley announced she was pregnant 3 days before Christmas. I still remember the exact moment because my mother screamed so loudly I almost dropped a tray of mashed potatoes. Not screamed in anger. Screamed in excitement. "Oh my God," she cried, grabbing Ashley's face dramatically. "A baby. We're having a baby." Ashley sat there smiling nervously while Tyler kept one arm around her shoulders like he deserved credit for surviving basic biology. Meanwhile I was standing at the kitchen counter thinking, this is either going to change her life, or ruin somebody else's. Turns out it was both. At first Ashley acted excited. She posted ultrasound pictures online with captions about new beginnings and unexpected blessings. My mother shared every single post like Ashley had personally cured cancer. But behind the scenes, Ashley was miserable. She hated morning sickness. Hated gaining weight. Hated that Tyler suddenly worked late all the time. Hated that her college friends stopped inviting her out drinking. And every single complaint somehow became everyone else's emergency. Especially mine. "Can you take Ashley to her appointment?" my mom would ask while I was halfway through a hospital shift. "Can you loan Ashley some grocery money? Can you help her clean her apartment? Can you check if this medication is safe during pregnancy?" At one point I was helping Ashley more than Tyler was. And not once did she thank me. Actually, the further along her pregnancy got, the colder she became toward me. At first I thought maybe she was scared. But eventually I realized something worse. She resented me. Because I made motherhood look survivable. Not glamorous. Not easy. But survivable. And Ashley didn't want survivable. She wanted escape. Around her 7th month of pregnancy, she started talking obsessively about moving to California after graduation. Apparently one of her friends knew somebody trying to build a lifestyle content house near Los Angeles. Ashley became convinced she was going to turn herself into an influencer. I wish I were joking. She spent hours filming day in my life videos while my mother watched Eli because Ashley said pregnancy made her too mentally drained to babysit herself. One night I walked into my parents' living room and found Ashley practicing brand introduction videos into her phone. "Hey beautiful people," she said in this fake soft voice I'd never heard before. "Welcome back to my healing journey." She stopped when she noticed me standing there. Then rolled her eyes. "What?" I shrugged. "Nothing." "No, say it." I almost didn't. But honestly I was tired. Telling strangers online you're starting a healing journey while mom folds your laundry is a little ironic. My mother immediately jumped in. "Vanessa, don't start." Ashley crossed her arms. "You always judge me." "No," I said calmly. "I worry about you. I don't need your concern." "Okay. You think because you struggled as a single mom, everybody has to struggle." That one hit harder than she realized. Because I never wanted Ashley to struggle the way I did. Not once. But before I could answer, my mother stepped between us. "Ashley's life doesn't have to look like yours," she said sharply. And there it was again. That subtle little reminder. Ashley was still the hopeful future. I was just the difficult past everybody survived. A few weeks later my parents invited me over for dinner. Just me. No Eli. The second I walked into the house, something felt off. The dining room table was fully set like we were having some kind of formal meeting. My dad looked nervous. Ashley wouldn't make eye contact. And my mother was being way too nice. That should have been my warning sign. Dinner started awkwardly quiet. Ashley pushed food around her plate while Tyler texted under the table. My dad cleared his throat about 6 different times before finally speaking. So, he began carefully, Ashley's graduation is coming up. I nodded slowly. And after graduation, my mother jumped in quickly, there's an incredible opportunity waiting for her in California. Ashley perked up immediately. It's this amazing content group, she explained. A bunch of creators living together, networking, building platforms. How are you moving to California with a newborn? I asked. The table went silent. Not confused silent. Prepared silent. Like they'd been waiting for me to ask. Ashley stared down at her lap. Then my mother reached across the table and patted Ashley's hand gently. That's actually what we wanted to discuss. Something cold moved through my stomach. My dad finally looked at me. You already know how hard your early 20s were, he said carefully. And Ashley's different from you emotionally. I blinked slowly. What does that mean? It means, my mother interrupted, Ashley deserves a chance to build her future before she gets trapped. Trapped. That word sat there between us like poison. I felt my chest tighten. My son was not a trap. My life was not a trap. But nobody at that table seemed to realize what they'd just implied. Then Ashley finally spoke. I can't do this, Vanessa. My stomach dropped. What are you talking about? Tears immediately filled her eyes. I'm not meant to be somebody's mother right now. Tyler stayed silent. Completely silent. Like this conversation had nothing to do with him. Then my mother leaned forward and said the sentence that changed everything. We think you should take the baby. I actually laughed at first. Not because it was funny. Because my brain genuinely refused to process it. What? You already raised one child successfully, my father added quickly. You're stable. The baby would have a good life with you. I stared at them in disbelief. You're serious? Ashley started crying instantly. I just finally have opportunities ahead of me, she whispered. Please don't take that away from me. And suddenly I understood. They weren't asking. They had already decided. Somehow, somewhere they convinced themselves my life was expandable enough to absorb Ashley's consequences too. I looked directly at Tyler. You're the father. Why aren't you saying anything? He shrugged without even meeting my eyes. Ashley's under a lot of pressure. I almost exploded. Instead I stood up slowly from the table. No, I said. My mother's face hardened immediately. Vanessa. No. Absolutely not. Ashley burst into louder tears. You don't understand. No, I snapped. You don't understand. A baby is not some inconvenience you hand to the nearest responsible woman because motherhood suddenly feels difficult. My dad rubbed his temples. Can we please stay calm? Calm. I laughed bitterly. You invited me over here to ask me to raise my sister's child so she can move to California and film skincare routines. Ashley stood up crying. You've always been jealous of me. That stunned me into silence. Jealous? Of what exactly? The constant rescuing? The excuses? The entitlement? But before I could respond, my mother said quietly, You've never needed us the way Ashley does. And there was the sentence that finally broke something in me. Because after 34 years, I realized my family didn't admire my strength. They depended on it. And the second I stopped carrying them, they got angry. I didn't speak to my family for almost 2 weeks after that dinner. Not because I was trying to punish them. Honestly, I just needed space to breathe. Every time I replayed the conversation in my head, I felt sick all over again. The part that hurt most wasn't even the baby situation. It was how normal they acted while asking me to give up my peace so Ashley could protect hers. Like my life automatically mattered less because I was better at surviving hard things. For a while, I kept hoping somebody would call and apologize. Nobody did. Instead, my mother sent me a text 3 days later that simply said, You're hurting your sister during an already emotional pregnancy. That was it. No acknowledgement of how insane the request had been. No concern for me. Just guilt. I stared at that message during my lunch break at the hospital while eating stale crackers from the vending machine, and something inside me finally started waking up. It is for the first time in my life. I didn't immediately rush to fix things. And apparently my family didn't know how to function when I stopped volunteering to be the emotional janitor. A week later, my Aunt Denise invited everybody to her house for a Sunday barbecue. Normally I would have skipped it, but Eli had been excited to see his cousins all week, and honestly, part of me still hoped things would calm down if we were all in the same room again. Big mistake. The second Ashley arrived, my mother rushed over to help her out of the car like she was carrying royal bloodlines. "Oh, sweetheart, careful. Don't overheat. Sit down immediately." Meanwhile, I walked in carrying 2 grocery bags, a folding chair, and a cake tray while Eli balanced a cooler behind me. Nobody offered to help. Not one person. And maybe that sounds small. But when you grow up in families like mine, you start noticing every tiny difference in treatment because the little things tell the truth nobody says out loud. Things stayed awkward for the first hour. Ashley barely looked at me. Tyler disappeared almost immediately to drink beer with my cousins. My mother kept watching me nervously like I might suddenly start screaming in front of everybody. Then came the humiliation. I was standing near the grill talking to my cousin Melanie when Aunt Denise suddenly said, "So are you taking the baby or not?" The entire patio got quiet. I slowly turned toward her. "What?" She looked confused. "Your mother said Ashley's counting on you." I felt my stomach twist. My mother had already been telling relatives this was happening. Without my permission. Without even asking if I'd changed my mind. "I never agreed to that," I said carefully. Denise frowned. "Well, somebody needs to help Ashley." There was again. Not. Ashley needs to step up. Not. Tyler needs responsibility. Oh. Somebody needed to help Ashley. And somehow that somebody was always me. Ashley suddenly started crying from her lawn chair. Honestly, I'm embarrassed to admit how effective her crying used to be. My entire family immediately shifted into comforting mode. "You don't understand how scared she is," my mom snapped at me. I stared at her in disbelief. "She's scared? Ashley's the one trying to abandon her child." A few people gasped. Ashley covered her face dramatically. Then Aunt Denise shook her head at me. "Vanessa, that was cruel." Cruel. I almost laughed. Because apparently expecting adults to raise their own children was cruel now. Meanwhile, volunteering your oldest daughter's entire future without permission was somehow loving. I looked around the patio and realized something devastating. Most of these people genuinely thought I was the selfish one. Not because they knew the truth. Because my family had been quietly rewriting the story behind my back for weeks. And suddenly everything made sense. The weird texts from relatives. The cold reactions. The judgmental looks. Ashley had turned herself into the victim before I even knew there was a war happening. That night I cried in my car after dropping Eli off at home. Not loud dramatic crying. The exhausted kind. The kind where you grip the steering wheel and finally admit something painful to yourself. My family was never going to choose me fairly. Not unless choosing me benefited Ashley somehow. A few days later things somehow got worse. I was halfway through a shift when my phone started exploding with notifications. At first I ignored them because I was working with a patient on oxygen support, but during break I checked my phone and felt my heart stop. Ashley had posted a long emotional paragraph online. No names. No direct accusations. Just vague manipulative garbage designed to make people speculate. Some women only support motherhood when it makes them look heroic. Pregnancy reveals who truly loves you. Imagine begging your own family for help and being abandoned. Over 3,000 likes. Hundreds of comments. People calling her brave. Strong. Heartbroken. And because Ashley had spent years building this soft, fragile image online, people immediately believed her. Meanwhile, I looked like the cold older sister refusing to help a pregnant woman. I sat in the hospital break room staring at my phone while my chest tightened so badly I thought I might actually panic. Then came the comments from relatives. Family should support family. Disappointed in some people right now. Praying for Ashley and the baby. Not one person asked for my side. Not one. That was the moment I realized something important. Silence does not protect good people. It protects manipulative people. And my entire life I'd confused silence with maturity. That night, Ashley called me directly for the first time in days. I almost didn't answer. But curiosity got me. The second I picked up, she sounded irritated instead of sad. Mom said you're upset about the post. You mean the one designed to make me look evil? She sighed dramatically. If the shoe fits. I actually pulled the phone away from my ear for a second because I couldn't believe what I was hearing. You're unbelievable. No, she snapped suddenly. You know what's unbelievable? That you'd rather watch me struggle than help me. I helped you for months. That's different. How? Because this is permanent. There was a pause. Then Ashley said something that changed the entire way I saw her. You already had your chance at life. I went completely silent. She continued before I could respond. You have a kid already. You work in hospitals. Your life is stable and boring. I still have time to become something. Stable and boring. Like my sacrifices made me less valuable. Like surviving adulthood quietly somehow meant my dreams mattered less than hers. And for the first time in my life, I stopped seeing Ashley as helpless. Because helpless people feel guilt. Ashley felt entitlement. What about your baby? I asked quietly. She got irritated immediately. Oh my God, Vanessa, why are you making this so emotional? Emotional. I almost laughed again. A child's entire future was apparently emotional. Then Ashley lowered her voice and said, You always make everything harder than it has to be. That sentence stayed with me long after the call ended. Because suddenly I understood something terrifying. Ashley genuinely believed I existed to absorb consequences for her. Not help her. Not support her. Absorb things. Pain. Responsibility. Sacrifice. Embarrassment. And the second I refused, I became the villain in her story. About a week after Ashley's social media post, my mother called me pretending she wanted to talk peacefully. That should have been another warning sign. Nothing in my family was ever peaceful when they suddenly started using calm voices. Still, against my better judgment, I agreed to meet her for coffee before one of my shifts. She arrived 10 minutes late wearing that same exhausted expression mothers use when they want credit for suffering they personally created. The second she sat down, she sighed heavily. You've made this situation much uglier than it needed to be. No hello. No how are you. Straight to blame. I stared at her over my coffee. Good morning to you too. I'm serious, Vanessa. So am I. She leaned closer. Ashley is emotionally falling apart. I almost asked if anybody had checked on me recently, but honestly I already knew the answer. Instead I said, Ashley's an adult. She's pregnant. She's still an adult. My mother's jaw tightened. You know, she said quietly, sometimes I wonder if becoming a mother so young hardened you. That hit exactly where she intended it to. My mother had always known how to insult me in ways subtle enough to deny later. Not cruel enough to quote. Just cruel enough to scar. I swallowed carefully. No. Becoming a mother young made me grow up. Her expression darkened immediately. Then she lowered her voice. Your father and I already told Ashley we'd help her figure this out. Cold moved through my chest. What does that mean? It means, she said carefully, we assured her the baby would be taken care of. I stared at her. You had no right. We're trying to protect our daughter. I'm your daughter too. The words slipped out before I could stop them. And for a second, something uncomfortable flickered across her face. Guilt maybe. But it disappeared fast. You've always been stronger, she said quietly. There was again. That sentence. That excuse. That burden disguised as praise. I stood up immediately. No, I said calmly. You don't get to keep using that line every time you want something from me. Vanessa. No. Being strong doesn't mean I owe everybody my life. People nearby had started glancing over now, but for once I didn't care. My mother looked genuinely shocked that I wasn't backing down. Like boundaries coming from me felt unnatural. Like the family mule suddenly refusing to pull the cart. And honestly, that realization gave me more clarity than therapy ever had. Because manipulative families don't panic when you're hurt. They panic when you stop cooperating. A few days later, Ashley texted me unexpectedly. Graduation dinner Friday. Mom really wants you there. I stared at the message for a long time. Everything in my body told me not to go. But Eli looked up from the couch and said softly, maybe things will get better. That broke my heart a little. Because my son had started noticing the tension too. So against my instincts I agreed. Friday night arrived cold and rainy. The restaurant was one of those upscale places downtown where everybody speaks too quietly and the lighting makes people look richer than they are. The second I walked in, something felt wrong. Ashley's graduation dinner had way more people than expected. Extended relatives, family friends, even people from my parents' church. Almost 20 people total. My mother hugged Ashley dramatically near the entrance while Ashley dabbed fake tears from the corners of her eyes. Tyler barely acknowledged anybody. And the weirdest part? Several people kept glancing at me with pity before I even sat down. Like they already knew some version of the story. Rachel was the first person who noticed something was off. Rachel and I had been friends since middle school. She was one of the only people in my life who'd never treated my family's behavior like normal. I had invited her last minute because honestly I needed emotional backup. She leaned toward me while everybody ordered drinks. Why does this feel like an intervention? I gave a nervous laugh. Probably because it is. Rachel's eyes narrowed immediately. Vanessa. Before she could finish, my father stood up, tapping his wine glass dramatically. I just want to say how proud we are of Ashley, he announced. Everybody clapped. Ashley smiled tearfully while my mother squeezed her hand. Then my father continued. Despite unexpected challenges, Ashley stayed committed to her future. More applause. I felt sick already. Because somehow even Ashley's pregnancy was being framed like an obstacle unfairly happening to her instead of a responsibility she created. Then my mother stood up too. And thankfully, she added emotionally, family comes together during difficult times. That line landed strangely. Several people looked directly at me. Rachel slowly set down her fork. Oh no, she muttered. My chest tightened. Ashley suddenly started crying again. Not subtle crying either. Carefully timed crying. I honestly don't know what I would have done without support, she whispered. And my mother turned toward me. Vanessa's been struggling emotionally with the situation, she told the table. But deep down I know she'll do the right thing. I froze. There was the setup. Public pressure. Public guilt. Public manipulation. Rachel whispered, Are you kidding me right now? But it got worse. Ashley reached down beside her chair and picked up a pink diaper bag. The exact same one sitting in my mother's hallway the last time I visited. Then Ashley placed it beside me. In front of everybody. My baby already knows her aunt loves her, Ashley said tearfully. The table went silent. I actually felt dizzy. Because suddenly I understood the full plan. They thought if enough people watched me, I'd surrender out of shame. My mother looked around proudly like she'd orchestrated something beautiful instead of horrifying. Vanessa's always stepped up for family, she said softly. And there was not a request. An announcement. They had already told everybody I was taking the baby. My humiliation was just paperwork now. Rachel looked furious beside me. You need to leave, she whispered. But I couldn't move yet. Because something strange was happening inside me. For the first time in my life. I wasn't hurt. I was angry. Not explosive anger. Clear anger. The kind that burns cold instead of hot. Ashley kept crying softly while nearby tables openly stared at me. Then my mother delivered the final blow. You already raised one child, she said loudly. So stop acting selfish and take the baby. And just like that, the entire restaurant turned toward me. But what nobody at that table realized was this. 4 months after therapy sessions, I'd started recording certain conversations with my family because my therapist encouraged me to stop doubting my own memory. At first it was just for myself. Proof I wasn't crazy. Proof things happened the way I remembered. But over time, those recordings captured much more than I expected. And sitting quietly inside my purse that night was enough evidence to destroy every lie Ashley and my parents had been telling about me. For a few seconds after my mother yelled at me in that restaurant, nobody moved. It honestly felt like the entire room froze. I could hear silverware clinking somewhere behind me. A waiter paused beside the kitchen doors pretending not to watch. Even the music suddenly felt too quiet. And all those eyes. Every single person waiting to see what I would do next. The old version of me probably would have cried. Or apologized. Or agreed just to stop the humiliation. But something inside me had finally snapped beyond repair. I looked at the diaper bag sitting beside my chair. Then at Ashley. Mascara tears. Shaking lip. Perfect victim performance. And for the first time in my life I saw her clearly. Not fragile. Not overwhelmed. Manipulative. Ashley wanted sympathy without responsibility. And my parents had spent years helping her believe she deserved both. I slowly stood up from my chair. Rachel immediately grabbed my wrist gently. "Vanessa," she whispered carefully, "you don't owe these people silence anymore." That sentence settled into my chest like oxygen. My mother crossed her arms. "Well." I looked around the table calmly. "No," I said. Ashley started crying harder. "Oh my God," she choked out. "Why are you humiliating me like this?" That almost made me laugh. Humiliating her? After they ambushed me publicly? After weeks of lies? But instead of yelling, I reached into my purse and pulled out my phone. My father's face changed instantly. "Vanessa," he warned quietly. I ignored him. Then I looked directly at Ashley. "You know what's interesting?" I said calmly. "You keep acting like this situation happened to you. But that's not what you say privately." Ashley's entire expression flickered for half a second. Fear. Tiny. Fast. But there. My mother frowned. "What are you talking about?" I unlocked my phone slowly. Then pressed play. Ashley's voice filled the restaurant table instantly. "She'll cave eventually," the recording said. "Vanessa always caves when Mom pressures her hard enough." Complete silence. Ashley went pale. I pressed another recording before anybody could react. This time my mother's voice. "Make sure you cry in public if she resists. Vanessa hates looking cruel in front of people." My aunt actually gasped out loud. Across the table, Tyler sat up straight so fast he nearly knocked over his drink. My mother's face lost all color. "Turn that off," she hissed. But I didn't. For years I stayed quiet while my family rewrote reality around me. Not anymore. I played one more clip. Ashley laughing with one of her friends. "Honestly, my sister's life is already over anyway. She's basically a tired mom with scrubs and bills. At least one of us still has potential." The entire table went dead silent. Even Ashley stopped fake crying. Because suddenly everybody was seeing the real version of her. Not the soft, helpless daughter my parents protected. The entitled woman underneath. Rachel leaned back in her chair slowly, like even she was stunned. My father looked horrified. "Ashley," he whispered. And for the first time all night, Ashley had no performance ready. No tears. No dramatic speech. Just panic. "That's out of context," she blurted out. I almost smiled. Because manipulative people always say that once the truth finally catches them. What context makes that okay? I asked calmly. She opened her mouth. Nothing came out. My mother suddenly stood up. "You recorded private conversations? What is wrong with you?" I stared at her in disbelief. "That's your concern right now? You violated our trust." I laughed quietly. The sound shocked even me. "Trust?" I repeated. "You told relatives I agreed to raise Ashley's baby before I even said yes." Several people at the table looked uncomfortable immediately. As that part was true. I turned toward Aunt Denise. "They told everybody I was selfish for refusing responsibility that was never mine." Denise slowly looked down at her plate. Ashley suddenly burst out. "You don't understand how hard this is for me." And there it was again. Always back to Ashley's feelings. Ashley's dreams. Ashley's fears. Ashley's future. Like nobody else existed. I finally looked directly at Tyler. "You haven't said 10 words tonight," I said coldly. "Do you plan on raising your child?" He shifted uncomfortably. Ashley and I are figuring things out." "No," I said. "You're figuring out how to escape consequences." Ashley slammed her hand on the table. "You think you're better than me?" "No," I answered quietly. "I think I grew up faster than you." That one hit hard. Ashley's face twisted instantly. "You've always judged me because Mom and Dad loved me more." The entire table froze again. Even my parents looked stunned. She said it out loud. And honestly, hearing it spoken openly hurt less than I expected. Because deep down I'd known for years. But Ashley saying it herself finally removed the last layer of denial. I nodded slowly. "Thank you," I said softly. Ashley blinked. "What?" "Thank you for finally being honest." My mother immediately stepped in again. "This family is falling apart because you refuse to help your sister." "No," I said calmly. This family is falling apart because everybody spent years protecting Ashley from reality. That silence afterward felt enormous. Heavy. Painfully truthful. I took a slow breath. Then finally said the thing I should have said years earlier. I am not sacrificing my life because Ashley refuses to take responsibility for hers. Nobody argued immediately. Because for once, there wasn't actually a defense for what they'd done. Then my father quietly asked, "So what now?" I looked at him for a long moment. Honestly, that question broke my heart more than the screaming did. Because he sounded genuinely confused. Like he truly believed there was still a version of this story where I stayed and accepted everything. I swallowed carefully. "Now," I said quietly, "Ashley becomes a mother." Ashley started crying again immediately. But this time it sounded different. Not manipulative. Fear. Real fear finally creeping in now that nobody was rescuing her. And strangely enough, that was the first honest emotion I'd seen from her in months. I picked up my purse slowly. Then looked at my mother one last time. "You spent my entire life teaching me my value came from what I could survive for other people," I said. "But I'm done proving my love through suffering." My mother looked shaken. Actually shaken. Because for the first time her control over me wasn't working. Rachel stood beside me immediately. "We're leaving," she announced firmly. Nobody stopped us. Nobody even knew how. As Rachel and I walked toward the restaurant entrance, I could feel dozens of eyes following us. But for once, I didn't feel ashamed. I felt free. And right before we reached the door, I heard something behind me that I never expected. My father's voice. Quiet. Tired. Disappointed. "Ashley," he said softly, "what have you done?" After the restaurant disaster, my phone exploded for 3 straight days. Calls. Texts. Voicemails. Most of them from family members suddenly desperate to hear my side. Funny how nobody wanted my side until public evidence embarrassed them. I ignored almost everyone. Not because I wanted revenge. I was just emotionally exhausted. There's a specific kind of grief that comes from finally accepting your family may never become the people you hoped they'd be. And honestly, that realization hit harder than the screaming, the manipulation, or even the humiliation. Because once denial dies, reality gets very quiet. The only person I answered immediately was Rachel. She came over the morning after the restaurant confrontation carrying coffee and a bag of donuts like emotional support was a full-time profession. The second I opened the door, she looked at me carefully. "How bad?" I laughed weakly. "I cried in the shower for 40 minutes. Reasonable." And then I felt guilty for exposing them. Rachel stared at me like I'd lost my mind. "Vanessa," she said slowly, "your family publicly tried to pressure you into raising somebody else's child. I know. They lied about you for weeks. I know. They ambushed you in front of strangers. I know." She handed me coffee. "Then stop apologizing for surviving people who never apologized for hurting you." That sentence stayed with me. Because she was right. My entire life I'd been trained to feel guilty the second I protected myself. And healing from toxic family dynamics means learning that boundaries feel cruel at first. Especially to people who benefited from your lack of them. A few days later, my father finally came to my condo alone. No mother. No Ashley. Just him. When I opened the door, he looked older somehow. Tired. Like the restaurant situation finally forced him to see things he'd spent years avoiding. Eli was at school, thankfully. I invited him inside quietly. For a few minutes neither of us spoke. Then he finally sighed. "Ashley moved out." I blinked. "What?" "She's staying with Tyler's cousin now." That surprised me. Ashley hated inconvenience. Tyler's cousin lived in a tiny apartment over a mechanic shop. What happened? My father rubbed his face slowly. "Reality," he said bitterly. Apparently after the restaurant confrontation, Tyler panicked once he realized people were starting to question him too. Ashley's social media comments turned ugly fast after relatives started talking privately. People who once called her brave were suddenly asking why the baby's father wasn't being held accountable. Others questioned why Ashley expected her sister to become the parent. The image she spent years building cracked almost overnight. And without constant praise holding her together, Ashley spiraled. "She blames everybody," my father admitted quietly. "Your mother. Me. Tyler. You." I looked down at my coffee. Honestly, part of me felt sad for her. Not because she was innocent. Because entitlement eventually destroys the person carrying it too. My father sat there silently for a moment before finally saying, "I should have stopped this sooner." That one almost broke me. Because I'd waited my entire life to hear accountability from him. But even then, it hurt. "I used to think," he continued quietly, "that protecting Ashley meant loving her." He swallowed hard. "But maybe we just taught her responsibility was optional." I didn't know what to say to that. So we sat there in silence for a while. Then he looked at me carefully. "You were right." Simple words. 34 years late. But still powerful enough to make my chest ache. My relationship with my parents never fully recovered after that. Honestly, I don't think it ever will. My mother especially struggled with the loss of control. She kept sending long emotional messages about family unity, while somehow avoiding responsibility completely. Classic behavior. Therapy helped me understand something important though. Some people confuse reconciliation with access. They don't actually want healing. They want things to return to the version that benefited them most. And I was finally done participating in that version. Meanwhile, something unexpected started happening online. After the restaurant incident, Ashley's vague victim posts disappeared completely. But one of my cousins quietly messaged me asking if the healthcare support page I ran was actually mine. Turns out several relatives had discovered it. Then some of Ashley's followers found it too. And slowly, thousands of women started sharing my content. Single moms. Exhausted daughters. Women raising siblings while parents checked out emotionally. Women who spent years being called strong when what they really needed was support. Every message reminded me I wasn't alone. One woman wrote, "Your story made me realize I'm not selfish for wanting boundaries." I cried reading that. Because that was exactly what I needed to hear too. A few months later, a nonprofit organization partnered with my page to help low-income mothers navigate hospital systems after childbirth. Me. The daughter my family treated like the boring backup plan. Turns out stability becomes powerful when you stop apologizing for it. As for Ashley, she ended up staying in Ohio. California disappeared the second responsibility became unavoidable. Tyler drifted in and out inconsistently, exactly the way everybody except Ashley predicted he would. And eventually, after months of chaos, Ashley actually started raising her child herself. Not perfectly. Not magically transformed overnight. But reality finally forced her to grow in ways my parents never did. We still don't speak much. And honestly, that distance saved me. Because sometimes healing doesn't look like forgiveness. Sometimes healing looks like no longer volunteering to be destroyed by the same people repeatedly. A few weeks ago, Eli and I drove to Lake Michigan during his spring break. Nothing fancy. Just cheap hoodies, cold wind, and greasy fries near the water. At one point, Eli looked at me while we were walking the shoreline and said, "You laugh more now." That hit me harder than he realized. Because children notice everything. Even the heaviness their parents try to hide. I wrapped my arm around him and smiled. "Yeah," I admitted quietly. "I think I do." And standing there watching the waves crash against the shore, I realized something that would have terrified the old version of me. I no longer needed my family's approval to believe I deserved peace. That need was finally gone. So if you've ever been treated like the responsible one, the fixer, the emotional support system nobody checks on, please hear me when I say this. Your ability to survive hardship does not make you responsible for carrying everybody else forever. Being strong is not permission for people to use you. And setting boundaries with family does not make you cruel. Sometimes it's the first loving thing you finally do for yourself. If this story connected with you, I'd really love to hear your experience in the comments. A lot of people carry family pain silently for years because they think nobody else would understand. And if you enjoy real emotional stories like this about family betrayal, healing, and learning your worth, don't forget to subscribe. You are not selfish for protecting your peace. And sometimes the hardest thing a daughter can do is finally stop volunteering to carry a family that never planned to carry her back.